Okay, guys, we are live. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Cannabis Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party. My name is Mike McCurdy. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Caucus. We are here today to discuss a potential solution to the continued incarceration of our brothers and sisters on charges related to cannabis. It is my pleasure to be able to announce that the Cannabis Caucus is in the process of helping to organize a coalition of partners to help launch a statewide clemency program with a focus on those serving time either directly for cannabis or sentences enhanced by cannabis prohibition in some way. In short, nobody should be incarcerated for cannabis, and we are prepared to offer Governor Gretchen Whitmer all the help she needs to fulfill her campaign promises and make this a reality. Our partners in this effort include the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the Last Prisoner Project, the Redemption Foundation, Force Detroit, and many others. As many of you may know, our coalition has already achieved a great success in helping to secure the commutation of Michael Thompson, an African-American man from Flint who sacrificed 25 years of his life for the crime of selling a few pounds of weed. Michael is now scheduled for release on January 28th at 8 a.m. in Jackson, Michigan. Our coalition will be organizing an event to welcome Michael upon release that everybody's welcome to attend. This will be a momentous day, and hopefully he will be the first release of many, many more to come. And as amazing as this release is, it also shows the ferocity of our prison system that he has not yet been released from custody. Even with a cannabis-friendly governor and attorney general, obtaining the release of one man, a man who has suffered an unimaginable injustice, has proved to be a Herculean task. Since helping secure Michael's commutation, our coalition has already aided in submitting another petition for commutation to the governor on behalf of Rudi Gammo. Rudi Gammo is a man currently serving a 5-year sentence for activities related to running a medical marijuana facility. Rudi is surviving a recent battle with COVID-19 that could potentially have turned his sentence into a death sentence. Tragically, Rudi's young son has recently been diagnosed with leukemia, and his child is having to live through the compounded tragedy without even the ability to visit his father due to the COVID restrictions. We are also in contact with several other cannabis prisoners, all with heartbreaking stories of their own of surviving in Michigan prisoners during this time of pandemic. There is so much work to be done to end the era of mass incarceration, and we have many great legal and political minds here today willing to help us take this small step. Joining us today will be from Washington, D.C., Noram Reimer, of the Executive Director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, along with Stephen Logan, also with the NACDL. He's a Director of Digital Strategies, and they will be presenting on their proposed state clemency project that is the backbone of our strategy to obtain freedom for cannabis prisoners in Michigan. Also joining us in this special meeting will be recently elected Washtenaw County Prosecutor Eli Savit, Representative Yousef Rabhi, Sarah Gerston, the Executive Director of the Last Prisoner Project, Alia Harvey Quinn, the Executive Director of Force Detroit, Carol Siemon, the Ingham County Prosecutor, and Ryan Basore, the owner of Redemption Cannabis, and Barton Morris, who is a cannabis defense attorney who's representing Rudi Gammo, as well as many others, and of course, our members and the executive committee of the Cannabis Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party. Super honored to have everybody here. So before we launch into the presentation by Noram Reimer, we're hoping to hear from Vida Gammo, who, excuse me, I'm having a technical problem. Vida Gammo, the wife of Rudi Gammo, is, I hope she's here. And
she's on, yeah.
All right, Vida, I'm going to turn over the floor to you. She's going to tell us a little bit about the tragedy she has experienced. Her husband, as I mentioned previously, is serving time as a marijuana prisoner. She has had to experience having her door kicked in the dark early morning hours by gun-wielding police, terrorizing her family and her children, and living for years with her husband incarcerated. Vida, please share a few words with us.
In this meeting, and just to let you guys know, we don't see my husband since March last year. So this is very, very like hard for us right now. My son is right here. Say hi, Santino.
Hi.
He's sick and we don't be able to see him since then. That's one of the most harshest things that we have to go through right now with the COVID and with my son with leukemia. And I feel too like nobody needs to be in that position like Rudi. It's something that is legal now, and a lot of people, not just our family, a lot of people outside of their families, a lot of citizens, a lot of friends and organizations, they want people like Rudi come home. There are no like prisoners like Rudi. There's nothing else for them to be in prison, and it's even more excruciating punish when it's COVID and they don't need to be in that position, when they need to be with their families, when they need to be in another place, basically, enjoying life, not like it is. My daughter is right here too.
Hi.
She is very attached to her dad. She would like to say a couple of things. You want to say a couple of things?
I miss my dad a lot, and I want him to come home.
But look at them.
I miss my dad a lot, and I want him to come home.
Okay, Santino, you want to say something? Okay, say something.
I want my dad to come home because I miss him, and I want to sleep with him, and I want him to teach me stuff. Me too.
Yes, he's like the glue.
We want him to come home too.
Yeah, he's the glue of the family. So we need him to come home, especially now in this time of the world. We need him to be home.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story a little bit with us today and letting us see your beautiful family.
Thank you.
We will definitely be continuing to fight for Rudi's release.
Yes, and I want to thank you guys and the Last Prisoner Project and everybody who've been helping Rudi to get his story out here so he can be here. Not just like him, like a lot of other many prisoners, cannabis prisoners.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. With that, that's why we're here, people. And that's what really this project is about. It's freeing real people, real prisoners. And I think we have the ability here to really make that happen. And Norm is going to lead us now in showing us a little bit of how we might be able to make that happen.
Thank you very much, Mike. And it's great to meet all of you virtually. We're very excited to tell you about this project. There are a lot of Rudis out there that need to get relief, and we'd like to try to make that happen. As Mike said, I'm the executive director of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. I am literally in DC, although we're scattered now during the pandemic. I am in DC, which I can attest to you, looks like an armed encampment as we gear up for whatever we're going to gear up for in the next few days. But I'm joined by Stephen Logan. He is not only our Director of Digital Strategies, but he is in charge of what we call the Return to Freedom Project, which is a whole series of different pro bono projects to try to help get prisoners home through one means or another, some of which I'll describe in this very brief overview of what we think we can do to help Michigan address the problem. So I'm going to now try to share my screen, and there we go. So our state clemency project is a partnership with FAM, which is formerly known as Families Against Mandatory Minimums. We've been partnering together on projects like this since 2014. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that we've done. Stephen, there we go. So you don't really need me to tell you this, but we have a problem in this country with mass incarceration. Most of the prisoners, depending on who you listen to on any given day, it's between 2.1 to 2.3 million people who are behind bars. Most of them are in state facilities. Horribly devastating consequences, like we just heard from this family, which is going through a terrible calamity. For no reason, somebody is really being held behind bars. And we are seeing, of course, Michigan being a good example, that states are beginning to change their policies. They're beginning to relax the sentencing laws to some extent. But most of these reforms are not applied retroactively. And even as we see legalization taking root, we still see people left behind. And of course, that's even more true for other controlled substances as well. We also know that these very long sentences, there's innumerable studies now that show that these long sentences do not enhance, do nothing for public safety, nor do they make it more likely that somebody's going to successfully re-enter. We also know that many people are in prison for crimes that they committed when they were under the age of 25, when their brains were not really fully developed, and that people age out of the tendency to engage in criminal behavior as they get beyond that age into their later 20s and 30s. And we also have a problem in this country with basically turning prisons into nursing homes, with elderly or infirm people who absolutely present no problem for public safety behind bars. So, of course, one of the solutions, and there are many, changing laws, making them retroactive, decriminalizing. We are in this country obsessed with using the criminal law for all kinds of things that are disfavored, social behavior, personal behavior, economic behavior. But the one other solution that is out there is executive clemency, the power of mostly governors, but sometimes with parole boards involved in or clemency boards, to commute sentences and or grant pardons. Our project, what we're talking about today, is focused on commuting sentences to get people who are serving prison sentences back home. But there are barriers, significant barriers to clemency. First of all, most prisoners lack the means to craft an effective petition. They don't have the ability to hire lawyers. Most people in this country from the very beginning are represented by appointed counsel. And even if they had counsel that they paid for, initially, by the time they've spent some time in prison, they probably have no resources left. The other thing is that most appointed counsel and or public defenders are either not permitted to do post-conviction work, let alone clemency work, or they can't get compensated for it. So that if the state were to launch a clemency project with specific criteria, the state gets flooded with petitions that many of them may not meet the criteria, or they may be very poorly crafted or inarticulate. So what our project does is to recruit, train, and support volunteers to prepare and submit applications for executive clemency. Now, you may wonder, well, where do we get the volunteers? Well, as it turns out, there are a lot of people in the legal profession, criminal defense lawyers certainly, but also many other lawyers who really appreciate the opportunity to help individual people get their freedom back. What we do is we recruit these lawyers, we train them. If they've not had experience with clemency, in some of the work that we've done, we've used civil attorneys, transactional attorneys. They're very intelligent, they're very smart, and they can be easily trained to do this work. And we built this model basically. I got into this by happenstance. I was at a meeting one day in January of 2014 when I heard that the Deputy Attorney General under Obama announced that the Obama administration wanted to do a massive clemency initiative. And they said they needed help from the profession to do it. So that's when I got involved with a number of other groups to create the project, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment. But I will say that we are a state, we are the national organization of criminal defense lawyers. We have affiliates in every state, and we have 650 members in the state of Michigan. That's exclusive of those who belong to our Michigan affiliate. There are some that are members of both, but there are many that only belong to one or the other. But so you can see that we have a great reservoir of resources, not just around the country, but in Michigan. The federal project, which I mentioned that we helped to found and we ran during the entire remainder of the Obama administration, we had 4,000 volunteer attorneys working on that. We reviewed 36,000 cases. There were 36,000 applicants who asked for a volunteer attorney to help them submit a petition. We ultimately submitted 2,517 applications, of which 1,715 commutations. Obama granted 1,715. 894 of those had been submitted by this volunteer project. And I will say also that of those 894, 300 of them were serving life sentences. So I think we calculated that the taxpayers were saved something like $450 million based on the life expectancy of all those prisoners who were released had they remained in prison for their full term. We have also, after that, when that came to an end, we were approached by New York State, and we now have a clemency project going in New York State. We have 300 volunteers. We reviewed 600 cases. 121 applications have been submitted. I will say this, and I've not been bashful about saying it to the Governor's Council. We're very disappointed with the governor because he launched this project, asked for this help, and they're just not granting as many as we'd like. He's only done 21 commutations in the last 2.5 to 3 years, of which 4 of those were from our project, and we still have about 120 petitions pending. And I will tell you, it's not in the presentation, that we are about to launch a pilot project also in Colorado. Same concept as what we're presenting to you here today. So what is it that we do? We recruit and we train the volunteers in order to prepare petitions that meet the criteria set by the governor or other public officials who are involved in the project. We provide not only training and resources, but we support the volunteers throughout their work. We have an advisory committee of experienced attorneys who are there to answer their questions, help them draft the petitions. We do bi-weekly webinars so that they can run whatever questions they have by us. We're there throughout the whole process. We also track the status of the cases, and we make sure that the submissions are tailored to the requirements set forth by the administration. Stephen, why don't you describe the applicant case tracking system and how we interface with the state if we can get one of these projects launched?
Thank you, Norm. So one of the big things that when we were setting this up originally, and even in the federal project, is that the folks who are in the facilities and in Department of Corrections and in the administration are all busy. and we try to find wherever we can to make everything as easy for them as we can, and try to do a lot of coordination and work out things up front, such as how are we going to share information and everything like that. And the kind of the centerpiece to that is we have an online case management system, which helps us because it keeps track of all the volunteers and all the cases, so we can see the status of all of them across the board and see where there are attorneys that we need to follow up with. But another place that really comes into play is, again, that data sharing piece that we can set up, where we can get the case records and things like that centrally. And we can also pull together resources and instructions and all that training that Norm mentioned, and have that in one place for the volunteers, and kind of be a bit of a throughput between the state and the volunteers, so we can save them, the folks in this administration or DOC or wherever they may be, from getting like 400 of the same question. Folks can come to us, let us know they have questions, and we can bring that in and then bring it back to the volunteers to try to make everything go easier and quicker, and that we don't have a lot of duplication of effort. And one of the other places this really helps is that we can provide centralized reporting, because we have a kind of that big picture view of where the status of the cases are across the project, and we can pull together reports of where the status of each of the cases are, and things like that. But also, so we can give a heads up, okay, these cases are going to be coming in and be submitted in the next 30, 60 days. So the process can get started on the state side. In Michigan, it's the board, the parole board, or the office there. And that way that, we can give heads up and let people know that they're coming in and get the process going. But we can also see, like I said, the status of the cases, whether the attorneys have marked if they've entered engagement agreements and things like that. And also see everything that's been submitted, the dates they were submitted, and things like that, so we can make sure those cases slip through.
Great, thanks. And as you all might imagine, what's critical to all of this is working out an agreement with the state. Where we have obviously a confidentiality agreement, but we will then get directly from the state the critical records that are so necessary for the attorney. So the attorney, right off the bat, gets a package that will include the individual's inmate records, which are so critical, their pre-sentence report, so that the whole background of the case. Now, they may need to get some other releases if there are medical issues, but that really gives them a huge jump, and it's all provided to them electronically through a secure system. So what we need, if we're going to be able to do this for Michigan, is we need the state to buy in, number one. It'd be very helpful if there's some statement of what the criteria are. Obviously, as Mike said, what we're trying to start with are cannabis cases, or cases where somebody's sentence was significantly affected or enhanced because of cannabis conviction. It's helpful to have a public announcement that this is happening, because that really helps with the recruitment of volunteers. People want to do this work, but they also want to know that it's a real project, and there's a real chance that the people they represent will get relief. We then have to determine the makeup and the composition of the petition. We have to determine what the intake process is, and then plan for the flow of information that Stephen was referencing. So again, this is sort of the overview of it. Once there's a project in place, once the state says, okay, we're interested in doing this, these are the rough criteria that we have in mind. And I should say on the criteria thing, that can cut two ways, okay? We were disappointed with the Obama administration because they had very rigid criteria. And in the sense that you not only had to be a nonviolent person, you had to show that you would have gotten a lesser sentence under evolving law, which involved the sentencing guidelines and statutory changes. On the other hand, in New York, there haven't been those very confined criteria. And so that's what's, I think, causing them difficulty in deciding which cases they want to, they're going to take seriously. I would hope here that we have a real sense of what the criteria is. And then what we do is we will, first of all, recruit advisory attorneys. Those will be, people with a lot of experience who will be able to be a resource for the line attorneys. We will build out training materials. We will organize reference materials, and then we will begin to take the applicants and match them up with the volunteer attorneys that we will have recruited. And ultimately, we will also want to work with lots of partners on the ground to develop reentry resources, which, as you can imagine, when the state officials are looking at somebody's prospect of releasing someone, they want to know that they have a plan, a place to go, and if possible a job, but some sort of a support network so that there's a good chance they'll succeed. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We're really excited about the possibility of doing this, and I'll turn it back to you, Mike.
Thank you so much. So excited to have you guys having this proposal out there. And so everybody here, many of us here in the state of Michigan, we have connections to the Whitmer administration. We were really hoping to get somebody from the governor's office here today. They were invited weeks in advance. I'm trying to be somewhat understanding, considering that they are facing an armed insurrection in the coming days. So I think they're a bit distracted. But we really need, basically, for this program to be a success, we need to have Governor Whitmer on board. And she's the one who ultimately has the power to sign the commutations. So we all have to encourage her to come to another meeting with Norm, with our coalition, and get this project rolling. So I want to open the floor up a little bit at this time. We have, some great elected officials here, a couple of county prosecutors, Carol Siemon and Eli Savit. We've got Yousef Rabhi, an elected representative. And to you guys in particular, if you have any questions or any ways that you think you can help us from your elected office, it'd be great to hear.
Oh, I just want to say that I started something that's been very controversial and hasn't gone very far, but it was kind of similar. I have no basis to ask for commutation as a prosecutor, but what I had casually mentioned at a Prisons and Corrections Council meeting in the fall of 2019 was that I wanted to start reviewing life without parole sentences. We have about 90 people out of Ingham County, mostly for homicides. Some go back to they've been in prison since the mid 70s. And there's no provision for them to be reviewed. So I casually mentioned that, unfortunately, to a reporter who made that the centerpiece of his story, and some of you saw a picture of me surrounded by 90 mugshots, and it got a lot of negative feedback, but also an incredible amount of positive feedback, where I'm getting letters weekly from families in other parts of the state where I have zero jurisdiction saying, please do something for my family, please do something for my child. And so my promise has always been is that not everyone will be able to get out of prison. I can think of a few people who probably never will be able to, but most people deserve a second chance. So I started this, so once it got blown up in the media, I have two volunteer attorneys, one a retired assistant attorney general and one a retired defense attorney who did a variety of other things. And they did get some records from our records and then the Department of Corrections. And we've begun a review process. We had an agreement how that would look, but we haven't really gotten to the point where we figured out what we do if. So if I get someone who's a worthy candidate for a review by the parole board and commutation, there's not really a mechanism. So this is encouraging that there might be a mechanism. I will just say one thing, and then I'll turn it over to others, that what I really would like to see, first of all, I do think it needs to encompass violent crimes as well as nonviolent. That's politically not popular, but there are many, many people who've committed homicides who deserve to be back out in the community. The other thing is, and some don't, but the other thing is that, so I favor eliminating juvenile life without parole sentences and adult life without parole sentences. I emphatically support that, and I'm trying very hard within the framework of our statutory scheme to not make that an option. There are clear first-degree cases, and the problem is the way the law is written in Michigan. It's easier to prove an open murder case sometimes and get a first-degree conviction than it is a second. So it really constrains me in my legal theories if I only go with second degree. So there's some issues with that. I also would like to see something that would have automatic second chance reviews, like some states like Washington and California. I haven't studied them. So I'm wondering how, that's where I come to the question, Norman. I'm wondering how this fits, because this is a structure that really is dependent on commutation, which is an unwieldy structure. Certainly having volunteer attorneys, because right now people get, if they have a compelling story and they get someone's attention, then their case might move. There are hundreds of other people who never will get a chance because their story isn't like, some like I've published a book of art, or something, or I've totally, I brought meditation to my whole, jail block or prison block. So I'm kind of curious about whether you see this as a stopgap measure, like on the way to something else.
Well, thank you very much. I would say, first of all, that you're absolutely right. This is not the best way of solving the problem of mass incarceration. It's not the best way of undoing the damage that's been done, but it is a way of doing it. It is a way that helps. It just so happens our organization just adopted a model second look legislation, a bill for second look legislation, which, as you might expect from the defense bar, is very progressive. It would give anybody an opportunity to go back for reconsideration after 10 years, to go to a judge. Obviously, as you just said, there are going to be people that will never get out. They probably, some maybe never should get out, but there are an awful lot of people, the violent crime is a term of art. There are often violent crimes where the individual didn't engage in violence. Oftentimes homicide, because of the circumstances, are actually some of the least horrific crimes that can be committed. It all depends on, a situation that gets out of control, and that person may never commit another crime. So to be clear, we favor a broad program. We favor front-end relief. We favor second looks, but we also favor a very broad clemency program. But I do think it's, especially because, this is a particular caucus with a specific issue, and those are particularly deserving cases. And if you can get some traction with that, that can pave the way to broader criteria. But I would hope that, there would be some agreement to take a look at any sentence that somebody's done up more than 20 years. They should be at least considered for release. The final thing I'll say is that we have had some success in New York where just some of the progressive district attorneys there have actually written in support of the petitions we've submitted, which it should carry weight with the governor, but in some situations where the governor hasn't acted, it actually helped them get parole. So there's plenty of opportunity, I think, for prosecutors who are willing to take a look at the folks that have been convicted in their jurisdictions to see if they can give them some help.
Yeah, and Carol, I mean, we really see this at the Cannabis Caucus as a way to really try to open the door, create a process for commutation that hopefully can expand much beyond cannabis prisoners. But we think there's really, there were promises made by the governor to release cannabis prisoners, and we believe about helping her fulfill those promises, and hopefully better things can come from this as well, a broad program.
Mike, can I ask you a question? Because I honestly don't know the answer. So for minimal, minor marijuana offenses, Ingham County has diverted those. It's not a denial of a warrant, but it diverted those since the mid-1970s. And we also typically have done 7411 and other things. So it's when, I know that there were some back with cocaine, mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole for 650 grams or more. I was a Jim Giddings law clerk when someone was sentenced under that, and he didn't want to do it, but he had to because that was the law. But I guess, do you have a sense out of Ingham County what we have? Because I don't show that we send people to prison for marijuana. so I know that there are ways it shows up, Norm, that aren't like, it may show up as, so I have a couple that were homicides that were ripping off a drug dealer and turned out to be a homicide, but they weren't a marijuana case. So Mike, do you have a sense how many, or someone else here on the call? Because I keep looking at our statistics and I'm not seeing that we're doing long sentences on marijuana, but I'm just might be dead wrong.
Mike, could I speak to that?
Please.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah with Last Prisoner Project. And thank you so much for that question. I think this is something we face a lot, and it has come up. It came up when we were sort of getting the data on who is currently incarcerated in Michigan for cannabis offenses. And in every state that we work in, we sort of hear the same. You know, we simply don't incarcerate anyone for long sentences in our prisons for cannabis offenses. And I think by and large, that's true. You are not going to find large populations of, you know, someone that is incarcerated for decades for simple possession, or maybe even just for cannabis distribution. Fortunately, as I'm sure you're well aware, that's really not how the system works when someone is incarcerated, particularly on a cannabis distribution offense. Generally, when you're incarcerated on distribution, you're also going to face a whole host of ancillary offenses, things like money laundering, structuring, conducting a criminal enterprise, sometimes state racketeering charges. So there are a lot of offenses that get tacked on to that inciting incident, even if at its core, the offense is really just the sale of cannabis. That's sort of one prong of the nexus of individuals we're looking for. It's not just offenders that have just one, you know, simple or low-level cannabis charge. It would include offenders that have some of those other charges that get tacked on. Another prong to this is Michael Thompson is a great example. He was charged under Michigan's habitual offender law. His three other priors were also nonviolent drug offenses. But what enhanced his sentence to the de facto life sentence that he ultimately received was that because of his prior felonies, again, nonviolent drug felonies, he was unable to possess a licensed firearm. So when the police raided his home because of the marijuana distribution, they found antique firearms, a handgun locked in a safe, never used in the commission of a crime, no violence attached to anything on his record, but because he got that felony possession of a firearms charge, that's what ratcheted his sentence up to 40 to 60 years. The third and final prong of sort of what we're looking for with these cases are individuals who maybe were not originally charged with a cannabis offense, or perhaps they were, but they're individuals who were out on supervised release and then violated the terms of those release because of a nonviolent marijuana infraction. And now are getting roped back into being re-incarcerated. So those are some of the examples of sort of the nexus of what we're looking for. And we did ask DOC and the Attorney General's office for data, not county specific, but just general data on numbers of who's incarcerated in state prisons. And again, when we first said, who's incarcerated on cannabis offenses, we got a list, I think, of about 15 individuals. Because the state was looking for just active cannabis offenses only. So we responded and basically laid out, okay, we also want to see these individuals that fit sort of this whole nexus of offenses that could be marijuana related and there's no violence attached to them. Again, to Norm's point, not wanting to use sort of that term of art of nonviolence. And we received about 2,000 names back. So we know that that's sort of the population of potential offenders that would be eligible for this program in Michigan.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if I can just add a little bit to what you said, Sarah, we've also found a phenomena where perhaps somebody has a couple of marijuana convictions in their background, and then they picked up a third charge, say for having a small amount of cocaine or something. And because it was a third charge, they then, you know, receive decades-long sentences. So it's really looking at where marijuana has added to the prison terms people are sentenced to. And it's really a complex question, and it's really hard to know how broad that population is. Though we know that if we do get this program rolling, those people will start coming to us. You know, once we, you know, so we need the program, And then we'll be able to start going through the list that we got with the help of the Attorney General's office of people who are serving time. We know with cannabis related offenses, but if people didn't even get in that sweep of 2,000 names, which is highly possible, you know, with some advertising and some outreach, we're hoping we can build that list up.
Well, and one more question, I'm sorry. This is a good,
You're on mute, Carol.
Yourself.
sorry. I have one more question. Sarah alluded to, you know, maybe racketeering charges or money laundering or other collateral charges. We tend, if though we have a lot of a big endeavor, I think that's a good way to call it, it often has gone to the federal system, which is a whole new, a whole different situation. So do you know about the interplay with the federal system? Are you guys also working on federal clemency issues, or, you know, state prisoners who end up going through the federal system instead of the Michigan state system?
Well, as you know, there was no real organized federal clemency initiative by this administration, but we did actually, working with, in partnership with Sarah, we set up what we call a trial penalty clemency pilot project, which are individuals who got severely punished merely because they went to trial. And we do have 24 of those cases still active, and we're hopeful that perhaps something will happen. But and obviously there's a lot of discussion with the new administration about how they might approach it. And so we're hopeful that that the new administration will actually have a broad project of some kind, but we'll have to wait and see. Mike, it looks like there's a hand up, Samantha.
Thanks, Norman. Mike, is it okay if I go ahead?
Oh, please.
So I'm on the board of trustees at the Lansing Community College. You were speaking a bit about needing a support system for people when they come out of prison and are reintegrating into society, I guess. I know that Jacksonville Community College has specific grants to work with people in the prisons and then to help them sort of transition when they come out. And they are actually really interested in starting a dispensary workers training program so that they can take people who have been convicted for cannabis crimes and help them get a job where that conviction will not be problematic to them. But that's not my college. In terms of LCC, I would love to bring something to the board for a program or support or something that we can do to help people reintegrate. I don't know what that looks like, but if there's something that I could take to the board, I would love to do that.
And one thing that I think is also important to touch on here that goes to the reentry piece that I know that is really important to this coalition is, you know, I'm going to use Michael Thompson again as a great example. Unfortunately, as we all know, when you're coming out of incarceration, oftentimes that is not sort of the end of your sentence. That is how it is for Michael. That's how I understand it is for every commutation, at least in recent memory in Michigan, that everyone is sort of given a standard 4 years of parole when they receive a commutation. That's also the case with Michael. And of course, the terms of his supervised release include that he cannot be somewhere with alcohol or controlled substances. And I think, you know, this is such an important issue because to your point, Samantha, you have this robust burgeoning economy in Michigan, one that's been declared essential amidst the pandemic, that has employment opportunities at a time when so many businesses are struggling and employment opportunities are lacking. So to be able to connect the dots of those opportunities to impacted individuals, formerly incarcerated individuals, even those that might be on supervised release, I think would be monumental. It's something we're working on in other states and something I would love to push forward with this coalition, that when someone's coming out, to then bar them from this industry that, you know, again, it's sort of this height of injustice that they've served time and might still be serving time for the same thing. And now to be released and still be unable to access that industry is certainly an injustice I would love to see this coalition work to redress.
Sarah, what about non-plant touching industries that affect the cannabis sphere? There are lawyers' offices where they never touch cannabis, but they still talk about it. Would that be a restriction that would apply to Michael Thompson and others?
I don't believe so. And that's a great thing that we're trying to get a lot of ancillary companies involved in. One of our largest national partners on the reentry side is Scott's Miracle Grow, which is a huge servicer of the industry. They're national. They've got a lot of employment opportunities, but they're non-plant touching. So generally that's not at all a problem for someone on supervised release to go work for a company like that. Of course, lighting services. I mean, you guys know every service provider, services the cannabis industry in some fashion. So that is a huge opportunity. And I would love to see companies that do that work in Michigan come on to support fair chance hiring and hiring some of the individuals that hopefully will be getting out from this program.
Thank you, Sarah. I would like to give an opportunity for Eli Savit or Yousef Rabhi, either of you, if you would like to ask any questions or talk about how you can use your elected offices to maybe support this program.
Happy to jump in, or we can let the prosecutor go first. Either way.
Yousef, go ahead.
All right, thanks. Well, thank you all for having me on the program today, and thank you for the work that you're doing. This is obviously really important project and is part of a broader effort, I think, not just in the state but across the country. As you said right at the beginning, this gets to a major issue that we have as a country of over incarceration, and at the core of it, the war on drugs and the over incarceration, particularly in the space, in my opinion, and I think many of you on this call share this opinion, is that this is an instance of clear basically institutional racism that has shown itself time and time again over multiple decades. And I just want to link it for a second to what we're seeing across our country in terms of the actual physical violence that's occurring, and make sure that we all understand that while that violence is shocking to see and is certainly something that is very scary, I think that it's clear to me that while it is visible, while it is scary, while it's happening right now, there has been a system of violence against people of color that has continued for generations and decades, and the prison industrial complex is part of that. And so while it is not the same level of physical violence that we see invading the Capitol, it is the same level of race-based insurrection, I would say, against what is justice. And so what is happening here in terms of the Clemency Project was happening in terms of how we're re-envisioning, incarceration in the state with criminal justice reform is part of undoing that. And that's why this is so important. I'm so supportive of the Clemency Project and the work that you're doing. But to some of the points that were made earlier, I do think it's important that we think bigger picture beyond clemency. We can't just rely on the governor's office and on who the governor is going to be. There needs to be legislative changes to a lot of this. That's why I was so supportive of the expungement package. I had a bill in that package to change how expungements are done in the state of Michigan so that people are not carrying criminal records with them for decades and decades and decades and not able to get those records expunged. We need people to be able to get back to work. We need people to be able to get housing so that we're not perpetuating this cycle of criminal recidivism, which is unacceptable. And again, a perpetuation of that systematic racism that we're seeing emerge in a very physically violent way right now. The thing I do want to add as an addendum and maybe a challenge to some of the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of reentry in the cannabis space is I would encourage us to think beyond just jobs in the industry, people that are doing, sort of day-to-day tasks. Because the war on drugs and the situation with incarceration has been overtly racist, I have seen it in my eyes as essentially the new system, while it is fantastic that we've now legalized cannabis in the state of Michigan. We've created a racially disparate system where business ownership in the cannabis space is not something that people of color, by and large, are able to enjoy. And so beyond just the procurement of jobs for people that are reentering from being incarcerated, we need to be finding ways for them to own businesses so that they can control their own financial destinies and are not subservient to business owners that, frankly, hopefully in most cases will treat them well, but it gives those individuals more power. And frankly, in many cases, when people are being incarcerated from the war on drugs off the street, they were entrepreneurs themselves and engaging in a business activity that is currently legal. And so for them to now enter back into society and no longer have, frankly, the same level of financial ownership of their future that they did before is wrong. And I think we need to be finding ways. That's how justice works. And so looking at the licensing fees in the state of Michigan and the high bar that it takes in order to capitalize a cannabis business, we need to be breaking down those barriers specifically for those that are formerly incarcerated for crimes having to do with things that are currently legal. That's how justice works, and I'm very passionate about that in this space. So again, just encouraging folks on this call to think beyond jobs in that space, but actually ownership. Ownership is so important: land ownership, business ownership, access to being able to build your own capital and build your own financial future. And I think we need to be helping and encouraging the folks that have been incarcerated unfairly in this racist systematic war to then be empowered to take control of their own future. So clemency is a very key part of that, and I'm very supportive of this, happy to help out in whatever way I can, but we need to be looking at other legislative initiatives to help reform this system as we see it grow and grow. This is a great economic space, a lot of great opportunities, but we don't want it to become so racially one-sided that we've lost sight of the racial injustices that have been perpetuated over time.
Thank you so much, Yousef. Ellie, did you want to jump in on the conversation?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just say, first and foremost, first of all, at the risk of repeating things, I agree with everything that both Yousef and Carol said. With respect to the Clemency Project in particular, let us know how we can help. I want to get these folks home, and then I want to do everything that we can to assist with reentry. Now, obviously, it ultimately relies on the governor and the executive branch making that decision. But if things like letters of support would be helpful from our prosecutor's office, obviously, we'll review each case. But for these lengthy sentences that have at their root marijuana crimes or cannabis crimes, we would be more than happy, I think, as a general matter, to provide those letters of support. I also echo Carol. There is a lot that we are seeing in our prisons that isn't just related to cannabis, and I'd like to see second look laws and potentials for local prosecutors to review overly harsh past sentences to be on the books in Michigan. And this, of course, is going to take some legislative action. But you look at Michael Thompson, David Layton up in Genesee County expressly supported his release, and there was nothing, despite the fact that his office got that conviction on the record in the first place years ago. There was nothing that could be done legally until and unless it went through the governor, and his was a high-profile case, right? I mean, his got national attention, but there are so many other people, as Carol mentioned, that are sitting in prison right now that deserve that same opportunity to come home. And what I'd really like to see is, some opportunity legally for prosecutor's office to take a lead in undoing some of these past sentences that are overly harsh. We're looking into legal hooks right now, but frankly, it's tough sledding in Michigan right now. Other states have been far more forward thinking than we have about it. And I think that that's, you know, and I want to say I'm fully in support, like I said, again, for the Clemency Project, but I'd like to do what we can, working with the caucus and others to move forward to sort of more systemic ability to rectify past sentences, because the truth of the matter is that we got a great governor right now who's been supportive of this. That's not necessarily going to happen in the future. We're not going to have Governor Whitmer there forever. We're not going to necessarily have somebody that you know, has a progressive view of this in the future. And giving as many hooks as possible to locally elected prosecuting attorneys at least allows us to operate in this space when clemency may not be something that's on the table. So you know, all this is to say, again, fully supportive. Let us know how we can help, but I'd also really be supportive of efforts to move forward to, you know, give us more direct discretion to end these overly lengthy sentences quickly without having to go through the sort of the lengthy by law clemency process in the state.
Thank you so much for that, Ellie. We'll definitely be reaching out to you for support on stuff, you know, especially everybody. You know, we need support in getting the Whitmer administration just to the table to have a meeting with us about this, honestly. So that's you know, something we'll be reaching out, and, you know, maybe we can get some support on that as well. I want to really open things up to, we've got some of our coalition partners here. I discussed earlier, we've got Force Detroit, Redemption Foundation, the Last Prisoner Project. For some of you, I think this may be the first time you've actually seen a comprehensive report on this project. I'm curious if any of you guys want to talk about your work with our coalition, or have any questions for Norm.
I have a question.
Oh, welcome, Barton Morris. Barton's also been working with our coalition. He's Rudi's defense lawyer, cannabis defense lawyer, doing some great work. Has, you know, working on his commutation. Thank you for being here, Barton.
Thank you for having this meeting, and thank you, Norm. I've been a member of NACDL for every year that I've been in practice, over 20 years. I'm very proud of that organization and the work that they do, and obviously the programs that you've been discussing today are exemplary, and I'm glad that we're getting some focus, some assistance in Michigan. But unfortunately, as I think everybody recognizes, there's little that even the elected prosecutors, the prosecutor that prosecuted Rudi Gammo and the Attorney General, there's little they can do except for voice their support. In Michigan, we have to have the governor, of course, to get support for his release and for these clemencies, and not just Rudi, for everybody. 2,000 people that are still incarcerated for offenses, if they were committed today, they would not get the sentence that they would have received. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be getting any assistance from or even communication from the governor's office. And so my question to you is simply, do you have any advice that we can employ, that we can do in order to be persuasive with the governor? I think that what's really necessary is for a committee to be formed through the governor's office to set forth the conditions that you had talked about, the criteria that need to be taken into consideration when identifying people that do fit that criteria, that do need to be released immediately, and try to accelerate the process, because the process that we have now is exceedingly slow. It doesn't go right to the governor. It has to go through the parole board first, and the Michigan Department of Corrections, and then they review it and make recommendations and see if it's got merit. And I mean, we have a pending application for Rudi right now. So again, thank you for explaining the projects that are going on in NACDL with regard to clemency. And I just wonder if you have any recommendations for trying to be persuasive with our governor.
That's always the toughest question. I mean, you really need the will. The governor has to have the will to do it. I would hope that those caucuses like this and others would make the case to her. one of the things that we've been trying to do increasingly when we get involved in this is profile the cases so that they get attention. We work with some media outlets to try to do films and whatnot. But really it comes down to, there's got to be, I think, it's a combination of making the appeal on 3 grounds. One is to remedy what's been talked about, which is the racial injustice that has been perpetuated for years and years in our criminal justice system, in our jails. Secondly is the human dimension, the waste of human resources, the impact on families and communities. And then third, maybe the least principled, but sometimes it carries the greatest weight, is the economic argument. I mean, we are wasting precious resources in warehousing people who don't need to be behind bars. And they can be productive, they can be taxpayers, and they don't have to be costing us money.
So if I can just jump in real too, Barton, in response to what you said, we're discovering a very unwieldy process that the parole board plays a very powerful role in. I've been told that there actually is no, we have an acting head of the parole board currently, and Governor Whitmer has the power to appoint a new head of the parole board. So that is one place. I haven't been able to find information. I've looked for more information on this, but if there was a way anybody here knows that we can find out what kind of process Governor Whitmer might be going through, it seems as though having a head of a parole board who is willing to help facilitate this process could be a key to success.
And I think that if she were to enunciate what she believes, at least are the criteria through which that the parole board should be judging whether a commutation application has merit, you're right. She does have the power to replace that individual who's not going to at least do what her administration wants to do. And I think that that's what has to happen, and do so with an expedient in an expedient manner, quickly.
Absolutely. Hopefully this coalition we're building can build some political pressure. I hope we can expect goodwill from the governor on this, and hopefully she'll move forward. But we need to put that pressure on. That's our job. And I think the broader a coalition we can build to be working on this with, the more momentum we can build and get her on board.
Hey, Mike, this is Ryan with Redemption Foundation. Just want to say I'm really thankful to have been working with you guys at the Michigan Cannabis Caucus, the Democratic Party. It's been great, along with efforts with LPP and Force Detroit and everyone else working so far. But for those of us on here that have been in marijuana advocacy and legalization for a long time, I kind of look at this as what we've been trying to do there as well. So, when we started off, people I think the only person that would talk to us was State Rep Jeff Irwin at the time when I was involved in 09 and 10. And, we just kept battling. And now so many politicians will talk to us, and we passed a lot of local initiatives that we knew didn't mean much, but it also proved to the politicians and the people that it was popular. So we just kept chipping away, and we have so much momentum now. So I know not all these measures are perfect and it doesn't solve the problems, but I look at it, this is the same way as, great support from Carol and Eli and what they've said in the paper. And then we can just keep getting wins, and hopefully what's happened with Michael Thompson and all the great press and positivity from both sides on that will help us move forward. So thank you. And I'm excited to help.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Ryan and Redemption Cannabis has been our key fundraiser, honestly, for our coalition. Been doing great work getting members of the cannabis industry to send some of the much needed funds to our project. Some of those funds we've been able to get in the hands of prisoners' families, and we're hoping to keep being able to do that. So thank you so much, Ryan, for all your work on this.
Yeah, this is Alia Harvey Quinn, Force Detroit. I just want to say that we're really, really grateful to be at the table. This is this type of opportunity is the crux of what we say we do when we say that we work with directly impacted people to impact legislation and make Detroit both freer and safer simultaneously. So grateful to the Cannabis Caucus, which has showed up very, very justly in how they've rolled out their efforts. Grateful to all of the partners. I'm grateful for the research that has been done, the fundraising that have been done, the opportunities to connect directly with prisoners and learn about their experience behind bars, so that our work is more effective. And I'm grateful to Naja Nava, who has been holding space here for Force Detroit. So I won't continue to, excuse me, I have children in the background. Mama's on a work call. So I won't repeat everything that has been said here, but this type of work is critical in our community. The Black community is critical for Detroiters, for Black and Brown Detroiters across the state of Michigan. It's critical to think about what opportunities and how the tax dollars are used in such a way that they create economic opportunities for Black and Brown people, and that some of that resourcing that goes to the state is actually used to support communities of color. So I think all of this is just of critical importance, and we're very, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alia. And Force Detroit, Naja Nava, Harvey Quinn, specifically from Force Detroit, has been helping us with prisoner outreach, which is, to be honest, it's a very, we reach out to prisoners serving time for cannabis, and it's a big job. It's an emotionally taxing job. You know, people you know, oftentimes they're so happy to have anybody on the outside who's ready to advocate for them, and you know, so that's something that we hope to get more help from coalition partners, because we will have a lot of people, we do have a lot of people that need reaching out to, and it's great help. Thank you so much for that work. So I want to be respectful of people's time. We are past 5:20, which when we were scheduling to end. So please, anybody who's a guest here, you know, if you have to move on, feel free to. But also for people who can stay, I want to open it up to our participants, any participants who have questions to ask or comments to offer.
Hi there. I'm Robin Schneider with the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. And I really wanted to, a couple of things. I wanted to thank Sarah from the Last Prisoner Project. They did a really good job of, you know, reaching out to us and you know, asking us to help with resources as they were working on Michael Thompson. I had a really good experience working with their team. But when I heard Rudi's daughter, the young lady earlier, chime in, that one, you know, it really got me. My father was a cannabis prisoner, which is what led me to my cannabis reform activism, and then ended up putting me into industry association. And I'm really, it's been great because my license members have supported me continuing to work on social justice and even encouraged me to continue working on social justice. But I really wanted to take a minute to thank the prosecutors. Carol's my prosecutor, and you know, what we just saw happen in Washtenaw County was a big deal because you know, the first step is to stop continuing the incarceration. And one of the things I always used to say is that the cops come and take your dad away, but they don't ever come back to see if the kids are okay. And from our situation, you know, and my brothers and my family, we were not okay. And so there's a lot of multi-generational damage and trauma that is done when parents are put in prison. So to both prosecutors, you've both been very vocal about not continuing the mass incarceration of parents and people for, you know, cannabis. And I think that the louder you are and the more you continue to carry that message publicly, the more pressure it'll put on other prosecutors to do the same thing. And it's ending a vicious cycle. And I really appreciate that. And it just, every time I read one of you in the paper saying you will not prosecute for these crimes, it's meaningful to me. And so I have a lot of respect for both of you. And I just wanted to thank you and thank you, Ryan, for inviting me, and Zara. And I look forward to being a part of the coalition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's exciting. Look forward to having you be a part of our coalition as well. It's one thing to take note of is that with progressive prosecutors are super important, and they're also low-hanging fruit. You know, prosecutor races are, particularly in the primary phase, there's something the cannabis industry, the cannabis movement, cannabis activists can influence. How many people do you think volunteer and organize in a primary race for a county prosecutor? So we do get involved in those races, and I think we need to get involved in more, and we need good progressive candidates, and that's something we should all be working on. So it's an exciting, like I said, it's a low-hanging fruit, and Ellie and Carol have proved that we can be successful with it.
During the 2020 election, I'm sorry, it's Rick Thompson from the Cannabis Caucus and from Redemption Foundation Advisory Committee. During the 2020 election cycle, there was some talk, one of the candidates mentioned an opportunity on a county-wide level to be able to do expungements because it was a national example, perhaps from California. I know that Jamie remembers this. I'm certain Denise remembers it also too. Carol's nodding her head as well. If we could revisit that maybe and find out from Norman, is there an opportunity for something that to be done in Michigan?
That's Code for America, and I haven't explored it, but I know that they've done that in California and other places.
Yeah, and on the expungement piece, there's a couple of steps here. We can't, under Michigan law, unlike in California, automatically expunge old marijuana convictions or old cannabis convictions. It just one of my major beefs with the expungement legislation that went through, though I think it was a fantastic set of bills, is, my belief is, like, why should you have a criminal record consisting of something that isn't a crime anymore? And California provided for automatic expungement. So when Code for America went through and identified the folks that had those old convictions in California, the law allowed for them to be automatically expunged. In Michigan, with cannabis offenses, you still have to, unfortunately, apply, and the prosecutor has an opportunity to weigh in. And I'll just say, I said this in a policy we released this week. We are categorically not contesting those expungements, but the individual still has to apply. So I think that the way that this has to work in Michigan is it'd be interesting to see if an organization like Code for America can work with our courts or work with our prosecutor's office and identify the folks who may be eligible, but then they've got to be the ones ultimately that apply. And so unfortunately it's a little bit more complicated just because of the way that the law is here in Michigan than it was in California. But I do think the first steps is identifying and notifying the folks that might be eligible for those expungements.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rosalie Flores. I work with Sozo Companies. I'm also a member of the coalition. I have two questions for NACDL, and then I would also like to introduce Leon Al-Alamin from the MAID Institute out of Flint. For Norm and Stephen, would you guys kind of explain to me if there's a cost to the state and if that would be any kind of opposition from the governor's office? And also if there, in your data that you're collecting, if there's are you kind of collecting reports on the types of cases and the length and kind of a comparison of what it would be now versus older laws?
We have not done that yet with respect to Michigan. I mean, we would do that if there were a program in place. There is no cost to the state. I mean, yes, to the extent that the state says we want to do this in a significant way, obviously there'll be resources required by the parole board, by the reviewing authorities. But part of what we do not, there's no cost for us to do what we're doing. We're privately funded for the administrative part, and then, as I said, we rely on volunteer attorneys. And I do think there's a case to be made, a strong case, that the way we've been able to set this up actually takes a lot of the burden off of the state. They get a fully researched petition tailored to the criteria they've announced. Yes, they have to do their own due diligence, of course, but it's all laid out for them. And even to the extent there's, the way we present it, there's an executive summary that summarizes the case. So they've got on one page, they've got the whole thing, and then everything else has been thoroughly researched and analyzed. And really, there isn't that much more that they need to do except verify what the representations are. I don't know what the victim notification requirements are in Michigan, but if you have a crime that has a victim, that may be a part of it. I know, for example, in some of the in New York, they get input. By the whole process requires input from the sentencing judge and the prosecuting the office that prosecuted the individual.
Thank you. Leon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Leon El Alamin, and I'm the founder and executive director of the NAID Institute here in Flint, Michigan. And what we do is provide reentry and advocacy work for returning citizens and individuals incarcerated. And I'm just very thankful to be on this call with everyone, hearing some great things, and would love to be a part of the coalition ourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We'd love to have you. And yeah, Rosalie will know how to get you connected. So the floor is open if there's anybody else here who would like to speak on behalf of yourself or your organization. Well, so everybody, I'm really proud of this coalition we're setting up. I'm really hopeful. I think that we are really handing Governor Whitmer an opportunity, a political opportunity for her to have a win on this. And there is no reason that she shouldn't be coming and meeting with us and setting up this clemency program. And I think as a coalition we can help make that happen. We're ready to, our coalition, as we build it, we're going to be ready to help with, the commutation, the reentry, every single step of the process. We'll publicize it. This should be a no-brainer for Gretchen Whitmer, to be honest. And it's a promise that, that we need to have her fulfill. So thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Mike, I believe Mr. Bernero wanted to speak. I think Mr. Bernero was trying to get in.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I just want to thank you for having me. I'm the former mayor of Lansing, and I know you know this, but many more families than come forward are affected by this one way or another. My daughter lost her then boyfriend, Darren Brown, in a tragic incident, senseless act of violence. He lost his life and was involved in the cannabis trade before it was legal. And many families have been impacted and are impacted, as has been discussed today. And as we saw today, when we hear about the expungements and the other progress being made, and including the great work by our prosecutors here, there's a lot of people cheering that. Just as, the people, when they had the opportunity to vote, voted the right way on cannabis, voted for decriminalization, voted for legalization. The people are behind this. I don't know why the politicians often are, a lot of them are behind, slow to catch up with the people. But this is definitely the right thing to do. And anything I can do to support your efforts, I certainly will. So I think you got to look at a bunch of things. I commented on the chat that I thought Ellie was right on about empowering prosecutors, because where you have those hoops, when you talked about those hoops, Norman, my daughter's a lawyer, so I'm becoming an armchair lawyer now, about all these legal hoops and the cost, the expense, the barriers that are there. So anything we can do to lower the barriers for regular folks and follow examples that have been done in other states. I applaud you for your activism, and I'm with you all the way.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Virg. And please, if you have the governor's ear at all, let her know. We've got a serious project. We need to talk to her. We'd like to get moving. So thank you very much for being here. And Marshall Clabeux wanted to jump in really quick. He's been handling communications for the Cannabis Caucus.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And thanks to everyone for creating this platform and getting people free. That's why we're here. So if Facebook watchers are wanting to get in touch in this project, our website is michigandemscannabis.com. There's a couple get in touch buttons. Also, our Facebook and Twitter are both active. So please reach out if you know someone that's in the space doing the work that needs to be in touch with us. Get us in touch. And yeah, I look forward to making 2021 a good year. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. This is a really important project, and we'll continue to move forward. And please, anybody who wants to be a part of our coalition, please be in contact. And any last words from our presenters?
No, I just want to thank you again, and you know, you're doing such important, amazing work, and you know, I've been a criminal defense lawyer for decades, and I just feel like, you know, we could be at a tipping point, and the rise of the progressive prosecutor is such a breath of fresh air. Can't say enough about that, but I do hope that, you know, all of you can use your resources, because this is a governor who should be doing this, and we'd like to help her. And like you said, Mike, it can be a real win-win.
Thank you, Mike. You know, I really appreciate that there are people who are trying to pull the pieces together. One of the things that I found, and maybe Eli, he was much more organized. He had a great transition team, lots of policies coming in. You know, when I ran initially 4 years ago, I didn't have, I ran after the predecessor was arrested, and I put together a campaign in 2 weeks and, you know, basically did it myself. So it was a lot of work, and Mike, thank you for reaching out so quickly then too. But what I think is that I'm so busy, like, constantly moving to, you know, on policy decisions on individual cases and trying to keep my people employed and, you know, all that stuff, that it's really hard for me to do as much the big picture stuff as I want. And I like do a little bit of dabbing in. I read a few articles, I'm doing something, and then I have to pull back and do my day-to-day, you know, obligations. So whenever there's somebody like who's done stuff big picture and brings pieces together and helps us knit a more cohesive whole, I'm very appreciative, because that's where we need to go. We can't, you know, none of us can do it alone. So thank you for being part of developing this.
I would just echo that, and I would mention, as I mentioned to many people, that part of the reason we were able to get all those policies out is because we borrowed from some of yours, Carol. So as you know, so thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's an honor to work with you all.